So AEW and NXT are basically at war with each other because AEW went on to TNT and WWE were like, no, TV is our arena. So they put NXT on directly opposite it at the same time, even had the like extended overrun and things like that to try and compete with and get a better rating and things like that. And almost like shut AEW down before it had even started. And like they've front loaded their first show, bringing back Finn Balor and, Imperium and all this sort of stuff. It felt like they were going at war, whereas AEW were putting on shows. I don't think that's the case now. I think both shows are just trying to counter program each other. And we saw it recently with AEW announcing months ahead of time, we're going to be doing Fighter Fest across 2 weeks because we can't do it on traditional pay-per-view like we had planned because it was going to be here in London or in the UK at the very least. So we're going to do it over 2 weeks on TNT instead. And then about a week before Fighter Fest went out, NXT were like, we're also doing 2-week pay-per-view now. It's the Great American Bash. Please tune in. And they have also like put massive matches on there. You got, they had Thatcher and Lorcan, they had Sasha and Io. But like, really, at the end of the day, we could debate, which is putting on the better show. But we're the big winners out of all of this, right?
Well, that's I think this is all kind of competition breeds that need to one up each other. And I think NXT was always a very good product, but NXT was a very safe product. And NXT had a very rigid formula before AEW came along, in which, yes, it was a very good week-to-week show, but it was week-to-week on the build to a pay-per-view, which is where you had all the really big matches and all of that big, like, blowing off all the steam that you've generated. But that sort of maintaining that steam and sort of building up to it was a very slow process. And I think as soon as AEW came along, NXT was just like, right, well, we'll just do everything. Just throw everything at the wall and see what happens. And it actually became a much more interesting proposition to watch. It, the extra hour, I think, added quite a lot to it. I think they had enough stars to fill 2 hours. They got to have longer television matches with some of their bigger names. People like Keith Lee emerged from essentially obscurity on the NXT roster. Like, his storyline before they went to TV was, I haven't been used in a year. And now look at him. Look at where he is on their roster. Next week he's facing Adam Cole for all the glory, all the gold. So like we're in this situation now where we genuinely are getting kind of the best version of NXT, and that is because they're trying to beat AEW. I would argue that the competition is different because I don't think like it never really was about NXT versus AEW. That just happens to be there on the same night. Really, it's AEW is trying to present a Raw and SmackDown level show, and it's kind of drawing numbers similar to NXT, but generally speaking better. So I think like when you look at it, maybe in terms of how much sort of effort is going into things, NXT might actually be the winner because it's drawing like 100,000 people less than AEW on the reg, but it is also meant to be the sort of developmental program. It's not, it's not in massive arenas. It's not got the kind of stakes behind it. AEW's presentation and Dynamite is very much like, one, old school WCW, but two, it's in the SmackDown and Raw mold, obviously prior to current global situation. But yeah, it's in that mold, right?
Yeah, I mean, we said the same thing. Like when the shows first started, is like NXT was the one that felt like the true alternative. AEW was started to be the alternative to Raw and SmackDown, but actually felt more like Raw and SmackDown than NXT did. NXT really felt like it was the true alternative for wrestling fans. Like I think, like the great thing about having both shows on at the same time is that we are now almost guaranteed every single week. Because there were times, like you said, in sort of the pre-AEW era of NXT, where a week's TV of NXT might have just been, it was fun. Like it was just there. Like they didn't announce anything. Nothing really happened. You and I would sit down to do the podcast and be like, God, there's literally nothing to talk about. But now that they're competing against something, there is always at least something to talk about. And the same with AEW. I think the NXT going to TV has made AEW try to put on bigger and better shows than what they would have done previously. And yeah, and as I said, like at the start of this, the end of the day, the big winner here is us, because we're now getting really good TV shows every single week. If you're not fans of Raw and SmackDown, and I think many people watching this aren't at the moment, but do still like watching wrestling, they're more likely going to enjoy watching NXT and AEW.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing, is like this is one of those where there's no point having tribalism here. Like I always sort of the feel of like AEW versus NXT feels very much like the console war, right? Like the choice between PlayStation and Xbox. The difference is with PlayStation and Xbox is it's a massive investment of money to pick one. And so when you do pick one, you tend to be a bit like, no, my one's better because I don't want to be like, oh, I spent £500 or whatever on the wrong thing. And I've also got all these, and then also now there's all these games that aren't coming to my system. So I'm going to be like, no, those games over there are rubbish. But all you need to invest in AEW or NXT, if you already watched the other one, is 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like it's such a small, like it's only your time that is required. And it is a very small amount of time in the grand scheme of things, considering how much content people probably watch and consume on a weekly basis. So there is really no point for tribalism here, because I don't think it's quite the same as even in like the peak of the Monday Night Wars, it was harder to choose because they were on at the same time. And there wasn't the ability to just go back and watch them very easily. So you really did have to make that choice to be like, which one am I watching this week? You don't have to do that anymore because you can just watch it on a recap. Like you can just watch it back online. So it's not like there is no big rush to pick one or pick a side here. You can have it all. Have all the wrestling. Please do watch all of the wrestling and enjoy it, because that's what it's there for.